Multi-part games, or episodic games as some like to call them thanks to certain titles, are games that are designed to have multiple parts but tell overall one narrative, one ongoing story. And what I looked up, Mass Effect Trilogy is not counted as episodic series, so let's talk about Mass Effect. Get out of here, Mass Effect. You had your time to shine in multiple videos. Out! Now, when people think episodic titles, don't try to default to the format of something like Telltale or Life is Strange, where the episodes are released in chapters over time, with many people liking that approach for it gives developers time to take feedback in, but it also meant there were large gaps where you basically bought a game that was unfinished. It also meant that, well, you already know how things will actually pan out in it, which is also kind of the charm of it, but you also have something like Wolf Among Us, that will always say, where they had to change things after episode 1 and had a huge gap between episode 1 and episode 2 coming out, to a point where the preview in episode 1 and episode 2 were inaccurate to the rest of the story. But it's generally what people think of when it comes to episodic releases, stuff like that, where it's told through chapters that get updated later on. But the reason I bring up multi-part games is because also there's stuff that was just designed to be one narrative told across multiple games. Something like, let's say, Digital Devil Saga 1 and 2, which are combined to be one long-flowing narrative, with part 1 specifically ending on a cliffhanger that directly leads into part 2. As opposed to two different narrative things going on, you're essentially one whole story told across two games, so they couldn't fit the whole idea of it in one title, so they split them across two games. Now, people think episodic, they also think choices. And as though Saga 1 does have several choices in the story, that does change what party member joins you for the final dungeon in the second game, which isn't a whole lot of a choice really. It also means you already actively know what the choice's outcome when they do anything in the first game, but it's one of those things where that's the only real choice in it, because I know people associate episodic games or multi-part games with choices because, well, like I said, many default to the Telltale experience when it comes to that, but it's not always the case when it comes to how a multi-part game is designed. The .hack series from the get-go is a multimedia project that is entirely episodic franchise, with the narrative for the first part being told across 4 games: .hack Infection, Mutation, Outbreak, Quarantine. All 4 titles that combine into one long-flowing narrative, and the save file you made in the beginning can carry over into the next game, so on and so forth. It does mean each game has a default placeholder file setting, and you tend to start in the middle of the series for whatever reason, but it's one of those things that it is a big thing of a multi-part game with one long flowing narrative, especially how things interweave, how characters change, and everything that goes on, and the skills you get. It also means each game can build upon the mechanics of the one that went before it, and stuff like that. So it is a pretty cool case that one of these days will come back. Like I said, GU, which was a sequel series where you could also take your save file across those games too, and once again, it was designed to be a trilogy, with Volume 4 being only something added in for the Reconnection HD collection. But it's one of those things that it's just one big long-flowing narrative across multiple games, creating this not only big journey, but also your distinct save file being carried across. And the fact that they then carried that across into a sequel series on top of it, which was its own multimedia project for .hack GU as well. It's just one of those crazy things I can't imagine developers nowadays really try to replicate on that scale. Many games give you save data bonuses for that previous entry, but none let you carry over your save file over and over and over and over in the same way .hack and then .hack GU allowed you to do. The Persona 2 duology was again designed to be a multi-part games, where each game is one half of a longer narrative, and the way you try to have similar events play out, but the sheer differences in things that happen, including the party you see. Where in Innocent Sin, you had this whole entire party comprised of these characters, but there are only these side characters that you will meet at one point in narrative. these side characters are then the main party of Eternal Punishment. But if you were someone who played Eternal Punishment first, especially back in the day when they released Eternal Punishment only on the PS1 worldwide, rather than releasing Innocent Sin as well, then these side characters you're meeting in Eternal Punishment, those are the main characters of Innocent Sin. And there's an interesting juxtaposition between these two games, how they handle the party, where technically characters who are on the side in one game are now the main focus of the other games. It's a cool dynamic to have that happen. Yes, it's still designed for you to play it in the order of Innocent Sin, their Eternal Punishment, with you being able to carry over save data, which transfers over stuff such as the Arcana cards you obtain, and also Tatsuya's level for the Innocent Sin, its Eternal Punishment, implying if your level is a certain threshold or higher, it'll carry over the level, or let's give you the default. But it's also a thing we can also continue the journey in that aspect, but just seeing the dynamics flip-flop and change, seeing things that play out differently in Eternal Punishment, even if similar events do take place. Probably the most modern example of episodic release would be the Final Fantasy VII Remake project, starting out with Remake, currently on Rebirth, and we're still waiting to see what Part 3 will become at the time of this video. But it is the most modern case episodic title, where it's designed to be a trilogy and one long flowing narrative, since each one ends on a cliffhanger for the next part kind of thing. You can carry over your save data between them, but rather than .hack, where it carries over your exact stats, level, equipment, everything, instead, from the example from Remake to Rebirth, Rebirth will just carry over certain summons between them, and that's it. Your materia and levels will be reset back to a base because the developers admit they can't really assume what the players have done. Which also means that the characters basically don't use materia in the story because of the fact that the game can't really assume what you're using, and if they reset back to the beginning, does these mofos are beating all-powerful entities with the most basic-ass materia because of how the game works? So, many don't really view it as episodic per se because of the fact that even if you carry over save data, it doesn't really change all much, but it is designed to be one long flowing narrative and everything that keeps track and going on to the next game. It just isn't like .hack where it's like, oh, we'll keep track of your stuff you do. It isn't like Persona 2 or Digital Double Saga where it can keep track of, let's say, character some choices you made, or in the case of Persona 2, also keep track of stats for a certain character, or kind of some Persona 2 where it's like, hey, what are these other characters, the main characters for this? Well, here, it's the same party as Final Fantasy VII, but you're getting more people as the story continues, but nothing else really carries it over. So it's kind of disappointing, depending on how you see it, as because I've been episodic, the fact that despite being one long night, it doesn't really feel like it's really taking advantage of an episodic release, you know? On top of the fact that, you know, full price titles, but you can see the same for the other examples where .hack was probably full price on the time in the PS2 era, and same with also the Persona 2 duology as well. So people saying that isn't really a fair comparison compared to other games that have to do the same thing, but it's one of those things that, once again, like I said, doesn't feel like it's taking full advantage of the nature of episodic, which is why some people don't really view it as such, on top of the long wait between titles as well, but that's more par for the course when we're telling things in parts. Who remembers that Resident Evil Revelations 2 was released as an episodic experience, having each episode come out and then be updated later? The problem with this idea is, one, episodic Resident Evil just like a weird premise, but the bigger issue is the fact that each episode came out like 1 to 2 weeks apart from each other, where there was no real time to take in feedback for issues from the previous episode. Basically making people feel like, what was the point of making it episodic if you can't take in any feedback from the game? Basically meaning the game was borderline done, but just held back for its nature. The idea was they thought it would promote discussion if they released Revelations 2 in the style of a TV show and everything, which, like, yeah, I guess, but part of the benefit of episodic release is the fact they can take in feedback. Like Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth took in feedback to the point where Rebirth's combat is way better than Remake, playing way more fluid, giving you way more options for each characters, along with improving the weaknesses they had for those characters and everything. For example, in Remake, hey, Cloud's dodging is a bit awkward and everything, and then Rebirth, his dodging is way better. Top of the fact that certain things that were materia, like deadly dodge, became a base ability for the characters to make them feel smoother. You know, fixing an issue, fixing in the next part. Revelations 2 doesn't really have that amount of time to do that if the episodes are released like a week apart from each other. Yes, it means that you have to wait a long while for the game to come out episodically, but it also means why make it episodic to begin with at that point if there's no time to take advantage of the episodic nature when taking in feedback. Siren Blood Curse, the third entry in the Forbidden Siren series, that is a reimagining of the first entry, with comments from the director claiming, think of it as if the events of the first Siren happened, then Blood Curse would be like a movie based on the first game. A lot of fancy words just say it's a reimagining of the first game, but it's one of those things that wasn't exactly done at the time, so I can understand why the weird phrasing. But it was released in an episodic nature, with it being 12 episodes, but the player could buy the episodes whether it be individually or in packs, with everything coming together akin to the first Siren. Since the first Siren was episodic in gameplay in sense of different chapters, everything for the characters and different outcomes based on choices the player made and branching outcomes and stuff like that. But here decided to make that nature into more of an episodic release style, probably to also coincide with the more movie-esque thing they're going for when it came to reimagining of Siren Blood Curse as well. So is that winter aspect trying to take what the first game did, but add a new spin on it in every way, including making it an episodic release where things are sold in batches when it comes to how the game is bought. The only weird part about Siren Blood Curse is the fact that despite it being episodic in nature, you can buy episodes in packs and everything I find shows it was all released on the same day. So while they did the idea of making it episodic in purchasing nature, everything to try and recreate aspects from the first game, in reality, it was still a game you could fully buy and everything. It wasn't as if there were like wait periods between episodes or anything. You could just buy all the episodes. You just had way more presentation of episodic rather than actually truly being an episodic game. Like how other games like the Alone in the Dark reboot game from like 2008, I think, or how Alan Wake will portray itself as more episodic like a TV show, but in reality, they're just one full game that you buy, just has a more episodic TV show presentation as opposed to the actual development style of an episodic game. Final Fantasy IV The After Years, with the continuation of Final Fantasy IV that was originally released on cell phones in Japan in an episodic format, with you having to buy each episode individually and stuff when it came out, and also having bundles for them. Then a similar thing also happened when it later got ported to WiiWare as well. But when it's more known editions, such as on the PSP or mobile phones or on PC, instead it's just sold together as just one whole entire complete game, but you can still see the episodic nature and how each thing is split up into certain chapters. So an entire JRPG, in this sense a sequel to Final Fantasy IV, was also told in episodic nature when it came to making it. It's also interesting since Final Fantasy IV The After Years does have a lot of stuff that the player can miss, including certain scenarios and characters or party members that can be entirely missed because you need certain party lineups for certain events that honestly you may not even think of or even have an indication that was the case. But it's just one of those things where Final Fantasy tried that as well for a direct sequel for a beloved entry, and It's the effing after years. What am I going to say about it? I got nothing positive about 5040 after years. So I just wanted to go over the entire nature of episodic releases and how they can help developers with anticipation for fans, but also heavily backfire, such as the long wait periods where people are still waiting for the finale of Final Fantasy VII Remake project and stuff like that. The long period between The Wolf Among Us Episode 1 and Episode 2 with how long it took because things had to ship everything, or the fact that it just means that on replay, it can be more knowing episodic nature. At least it bugs me a bit when trying to replay stuff from Telltale, episodic nature, everything. Including the fact that Telltale typically has the whole preview thing, which when I first played the games, I just tune out the previews because what I want spoilers for a thing I know won't come for months, but I just didn't want them to try and spoil things because Telltale doesn't show too much in their previews, at least in my opinion, kind of thing. Which is one of those whole entire aspects where it can help developers because they get funding now and help with the projects and taking feedback, making it better and better as the project goes on, ideally. Or maybe they could just make it episodic for the sake of a gimmick and not do much with it, in the case of Resident Evil Revelations 2 and that whole entire thing. Or maybe it's just episodic because they don't really have much to do with it, so like for the after years, or its whole episodic nature because it's a flip phone game that was then ported to other platforms. There's also a case where, like I said, you may think couldn't put a lot into it, a lot of missable. Yeah, we played Final Fantasy IV and playing the after years just suffering for a variety of reasons. Both gameplay and narrative reasons you're gonna be suffering. So the whole entire aspect of episodic nature, and just the fact that I still find it funny that apparently Mass Effect doesn't count. So no Mass Effect mentioned in this video. But hey, they also have the duology stuff like Digital Double Saga 1 and 2 or Persona 2. It's Insane Eternal Punishment. Games that are fully designed to tell one story across multiple games and one entire thing. That in the West got butchered since Innocent Sin PS1 never got localized, and then Eternal Punishment PSP never got localized. So thanks for that one. But at least we got to do some of 1 and 2 localize everything. So I have to complete that whole entire journey and everything and see how I try to make both games connect to each other. And I know many people want to count other franchises that just have long-running stories, but just because your game has a sequel bait doesn't necessarily mean the game itself is designed to be episodic. It just means you want to make a follow-up, while some games I've mentioned on this video are specifically designed for this whole entire aspect of telling one narrative across multiple entries and multiple chapters and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to go into. Alright then, go out there, play games, whether they be episodic or not. It's your matter. And also the fact that if you're in the future, you get the benefit of having all the parts immediately ready. I know there's people who are waiting to play Final Fantasy VII Remake project once Part 3 comes out, because it'll be the cheapest offer to get, and you'll have 3 40 to 80 hour games each, all bundled together. So for those people, good on you. Also another thing, if you are a late adopter, you get everything in a deal. So good on you. Alrighty then, so that's all I gotta say. Alrighty then, good day.